Today we talk to Scott from James Imaging and answer the question, is printing dead? Spoiler, it's...
Of course not.
Of course not.
Stay tuned.
At M2 Technology, we're on a mission to make IT accessible to everyone. Join us on our journey to demystify the ever-evolving world of business technology. Are you ready to get unplugged?
Welcome back to IT Unplugged. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Scott.
Scott, very excited that you're here today because we're going to talk about printers. Like one of the things that, a lot of people are going, like printers, let's go,
Right now, our audience is on the very edge of their seat waiting to hear what I'm going to say about printing.
Yes. But no, there's a lot more to it than that. And I'm excited to get into it. But before we do that, can you just let our listeners know a little bit who you are and then also a little bit about James Imaging, the company that you work for?
Yeah, you bet. So my name's Scott Janssen, and I've been with James Imaging 4.5 years. I've been in the industry, gulp, about 33 years. I walked from graduation stage at UWGB and into this livelihood, and I've been in it since and enjoyed it immensely. So a lot of people, James Imaging is kind of new to the Green Bay area. We're getting more and more established every day, but what really attracted me to James was the story of James. Mm-hmm. And so it's a fantastic story. Our company was started in 1977 by a guy named James Tageter, so now you know where the name comes. Mm-hmm. And him and his wife Lola started the business. His wife and her two boys, Tom and Patrick, kind of forged ahead. At the time, Tom was a senior in high school, and Lola's background was in art, and she was with the Art Institute down in Chicago. And you got to imagine, this is the mid-'80s, and a woman owned a business in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I have a ton of respect for Lola because I think of all the vultures that were out probably trying to take her business. She wasn't a classically trained businesswoman. But her and Tom forged ahead. And so what ended up happening is James had a brother, John. John got involved in the business. And Tom, our current president, what he would do is he went to school at Carroll College. He'd go to school in the morning. His Uncle John would take him out for lunch, which Tom jokingly says, every college guy needs to eat.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would talk about what he had learned in the morning and applied it to the business in the afternoon.
Wow.
And so Tom kind of got, on-the-job training while he was in college. But this is what I love. I was with the company 3 months, and the previous company I was with, the owner sold out to a Fortune 500 company, and it just ended in disaster. It was a nightmare for our clients. It was a nightmare for us as employees. And so you have a little PTSD in regards to what you had just been through. And what really gave me a lot of assurance is Tom said, I have a big enough house. My car's nice. I have a little sailboat that I enjoy using. I don't need a bigger sailboat. What drives me in this business is I want the employees of James and the clients to experience what my dad was trying to build and build a business my dad never got to see. And I want to make it the best for employees, and I want to make it best for the clients. That's what drives me. And I thought, I can buy into that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I tell that story not to sensationalize our beginnings, but to actually give our clients, our prospective clients, the very essence of who we are and what we're built on. And when we think about these relationships, that there is a depth to it in what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to build.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I've never heard that story before, so this is the first time that I'm hearing it. And it feels like that's a place that you'd want to, rally behind, or people that you'd want to rally behind and believe in a mission and kind of achieve something for,
You don't want to overstate it. It's not sacred.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting perspective for our president to have. There's more to than just how much money he's going to make on it. There is a carrying on of the family name.
Yeah. That's kind of a mission that is bigger than, the business in a sense.
Yeah.
As you kind of move forward. Funny enough that you say that. I don't want to directly compare it, but for people that know, like Paul Anderson owns M2 Logistics and M2 Technology, and that's similar in the way where he's phrased how M2 Technology is going to operate, where it's, hey, we're going to take care of people, and we're going to make sure that it's relationship based, and we're going to be transparent. And it's just one of those things that, like, when you hear that stuff, and it's not hey, our main goal is to get our earnings per share up to this. Like, it's easier to get behind a mission that's impactful to those around you and the employees versus kind of something else that's there.
And what was interesting for us at my previous company is it changed quickly at the end. So I left in July of 2021 or 2020, and it almost collapsed overnight. It was May of 2020. All of a sudden, just the wheel started turning. It was all about shareholder value. It wasn't about the employees. It wasn't about the clients. It was about shareholder value.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to be in an organization where that all of a sudden becomes a focus because nothing else matters. You become collateral damage at that point.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And you see that in lots of different fields. I will say it's not that different in MSP world or IT world, where you get venture capitalist money come in and
exactly.
Ownership disappears, that mission, that goal. And then there's some people in, I won't say, what horrible Illinois city there is. No, I'm just kidding. But, that's only caring about one thing.
Springfield?
Yeah,
that's Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love the mission. It's interesting because, that mission is such a great story to tell and relational. How do you take a relational, mission-driven thing like that and align it with what you guys do when it comes to, efficiency in workflow and printing? Like, how do you take that and use it when it comes to essentially making businesses better with what you guys kind of do at James Imaging? And if you can explain a little bit of what you do at James Imaging.
Yeah, so let me kind of start with what we do.
Yeah.
And then I'll kind of talk about, how that elevates our messaging. We really have two distinct sides of our business. We call the one side PrintSmart, and that's in traditional printing products, and maybe not print products that people would think of as wide format, digital presses or Zebra printers. That's so that's a pretty understandable lane for everyone to understand.
Sure.
What people probably don't understand as well is what we call our WorkSmart side of our business. And when I tell people that this is what we do, they kind of look at me like, because it seems counterintuitive. But what we do is we help organizations streamline the processes. In a lot of instances, actually eliminate paper. And what we want to do is we understand that that's a natural cause of what's going on in business.
Yeah.
So we could either just be obstinate and try and avoid our clients from doing this, or we could actually help them and come alongside them and make sure that those two relationships are intertwined, so that when we create a strategy for an organization when it comes to processes and printing, that they're aligned. And a lot of times what we're able to do is we're able to take the printing devices that we use and actually do some special integrations with them to make it more powerful as a communication tool. So now they might be doing things with scanning.
Yeah.
Or one of our clients, every time they put something through the device, it watermarks that, so that when it goes through loan processing, they know who scanned it, when it got scanned, which branch it was scanned at, things like that. So, so I joke that, printing's not very exciting, but what we're doing is we are going way beyond the scope of, we're putting marks on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the diversification kind of in that, is like, you kind of said it, like, yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but at the same time, like, has that always been where the company's been, or has that been an evolution because you've listened to customers and the market when it comes to the workflow? I'm sorry, what did you call it? WorkSmart?
Yeah, WorkSmart.
Yeah, WorkSmart. Yeah.
So the company I worked for previously, we were entangled with one of James Imaging's clients, and Tom, one of our owners, was able to see what was capable. And when our parent company at my old company started disintegrating, Tom went after that group and some of us. So he actually, in the summer of 2020, hired 21 of us actually, from my previous company to bring on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of that evolution then, where then you guys kind of developed the additional kind of value add with that WorkSmart.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So as we look at that, it feels like you'd probably have to get to know a business, what their objectives, what they're actually doing day to day, quite intense if you're looking at their workflow and stuff. So what does that look like when you meet with a customer for the first time and you start digging into, workflows and different things like that? And what are some of maybe the things that like stand out where you're like, oh, we can help that. We can help that.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a very real experience we had. So we're part of NUMA, and we had a major manufacturer in the Green Bay area come up to us, and when they saw a workflow and they described a manufacturing process they had that was pretty paper intensive. And so what we did is we actually went on site about 2 weeks later, and they kind of talked through some of their pain points in a conference room. And then what was really cool is they took us out onto the manufacturing facility, and we were able to walk through the process that they did.
Sure.
And we were actually able to see the products being built and how the barcodes and different samples and the documentation was going. And then at the end, what the organization does is they shrink wrap all the product, and then they have cameras taking pictures.
Okay.
And so you talk about how the two worlds collide. Normally what they would do is they would take a picture of that, put it on top of the product, and then when they shrink wrap it, to prove to the company that was receiving the product that it was intact when it left the organization, their printer wasn't working. And so, that creates an issue. And then we started asking questions. So we were seeing all this paper as we're going through this manufacturing process. Well, what is that used for? What is that used for? And the clients were awesome to deal with. They knew their processes so well, and they were trying to figure it out. But at the end, all these pictures that we're taking, I'm like, how do you retrieve these? How are you marking this picture that it goes with order XYZ?
Yeah.
And there wasn't. They said, so if they have an issue, they actually have to go look at all the pictures, look at the date timestamp to figure out where that picture is. Years ago, we had done a process where someone kept getting manufacturing warranty claims because of a product. What was actually happening is people were doing stupid stuff with it, probably one too many to have, and they were hitting things with the product. We actually had cameras through the entire manufacturing process taking pictures of this, and then they matched the serial number of the end product to the pictures. And then if they got a claim, they would just type it in and be like, no, it left our organization, or here's the pictures of when it was manufactured. That was not, that's not accurate. So it's ways to save companies a ton of money, make them more efficient, grab better data points, and that's where when I say people think it's counterintuitive, you don't think of a printing company getting that complex in the workflow.
Yeah. How do you build these skills where you're able to walk through like one of those and just like ask the right questions or see the right, maybe it's experience too. I don't want to answer the question, but like in that scenario, like it seems like a very interesting and like curiosity piquing thing. Like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, how do you build that skill? I wouldn't assume, like you said, a printing company, somebody that's coming in selling that would have the ability to optimize like all these workflows essentially.
Yeah, it was really scary at the beginning. So anyone listening to this podcast, if you know the book, have you ever read Who Moved the Cheese?
I've seen it on a lot of bookshelves, but I've not read that one yet.
Okay, spoiler alert. The whole book, the whole deal is, if you don't have the guts as a mouse to go find the cheese, someone else will and you'll die. And, being a realist about environment, understanding that printing is going down, you realize you need to diversify. So you're left with the choice. Do I stay in the lane I know, or do I move my cheese and look for other ways? And the number one thing I think clients are totally okay to hear, but people are afraid to say is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. The phrase I love to say to people is, help me understand. help me understand your process, help me understand your pain points. And people will react to that question.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's showing that you're going deeper into something, and you might have to get 2 or 3 whys when it comes to that, but like you are trying to get to the root of the problem there, so it is powerful as you kind of go through. And I want to ask you specifically too, because as you've been very successful, I will say, as you've kind of grown James Imaging, and just in your career, as I've looked, President's Club and all this other stuff. And I'm talking to these other companies. How do you break through the noise? This might be a little bit of a pivot to solve these problems for these companies. How do you get into the door? How do you make an impact like you are? Because I would think that a lot of businesses don't always have this stuff on their radar because it's a lot of education, so.
Yeah, so I think it's professional persistence in helping them understand every time that I go through the door of a client or a prospective client, I want to deliver value. So it's an education process. It's also a professionally persistent problem for the rep. It is it is because of their graciousness that they allow me to have their time. It is not my right to have their time. And so having that view, so that when someone says, now is not the right time to visit, could you call me? I had a gentleman recently, 9 months from now. And all the sales training will tell you, call him back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
No, I call him back in 9 months. Or for some reason, if I think that seems too long, another company, again from Numa, I said, is it okay if I reach out in May? Yeah, and the gentleman was like, by all means.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. And then you respect what they say. That's the first way you earn their trust. If you can't even follow simple direction in the pursuit process, how the heck are you going to follow direction once you're internal?
Yeah.
So it begins from the very first call that I make with a client. But after that, it's delivering clear, concise messaging, helping them understand what other companies that they do. And so what I have become filled with expertise on is on workflow in manufacturing, printing in manufacturing. And again, it doesn't sound like that would be very exciting, but there's more and more things to talk about with print in regards to different realities going on in the IT space.
I like that from a couple different perspectives here. First, the following directions, because I've been through plenty of sales training now that have been like, you need to be a challenger on this, and it is good to challenge and ask questions. But as a salesperson, I feel like it's important to also realize the emotional aspect of being sold to. I'm sure that people sell to you and people will sell to me, and we're going to do a pretty large spend on something for our company, and the timing just wasn't exactly right. And it's like, okay, please, like Q2 of 2025 is when we're going to be able to tackle this. But it was, well, what if you did this? And it was a challenge and the challenge and the challenge. Like, I'm telling you, I do want to spend this money. It's just not the right time, essentially. But it happened over and over to the point where I'm like, I don't think I want to work with these people, because it was just that lack of kind of trust. So it's I feel like that long-term view of, hey, it's like working out of desperation. You can smell Q4 salespeople coming. They're like, we got to close. Versus, hey, I'm here to facilitate what you need as a salesperson as someone else. So I really like that approach. It just seems like a little bit more of a long-term approach than short-term, like gratification.
It's very much a long-term strategy. And I think it depends upon the product you sell and what you do with it. I mean, not every sales process is an elongated process, but a lot of my current clients, it was 5 to 7 years to get them.
5 to 7 years. Wow, that is that's a long lead time, right?
But they were very large clients.
Yeah.
Timing based upon needs, issues, there's varying degrees of why they needed to do that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is I had a client that it was a good 8 or 9 years that David wanted to before he was able to do it, and we had actually gotten to know each other pretty well. And it was back in the day when some products, they were experimenting with inkjet, and so I actually had his order form ready, and it just happened to start raining when I walked in from outside, and I had his first order form, but because the raindrops were hitting, the ink was smudging, and he said, he kind of kidded me, like, what is this? And I said to him, I've been crying since you gave me the yes, and this is the result. So, so I mean, it had been that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and he just started laughing, because, he understood the funniness of that, because it was a long time.
So this is interesting because you're very good at building relationships, I would say, and everybody that I've talked to that also knows you would say the exact same thing. Do you lead with relationship or problem based when it comes to new clients?
Both. Because again, I take a cue from the client.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone is a relationship a huge thing, right? I think people instinctively want to connect, and so the relationship becomes an issue. But I could just think of a sales call I had yesterday that literally was 3 minutes long. And we had visited somewhat recently. The gentleman is a very busy guy.
Yeah.
So I just said to him, if this takes longer than 5 minutes, I apologize. And we were done in 3.
Yeah. Just read the room, read the people.
The room.
Yeah.
Read the room, and again, be flexible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is maybe another pivot because we're getting away from sales, but I'm curious, what's one of the most impactful or even just fun workflows that you kind of implemented with a customer?
The one that probably meant the most to me, I'll go, it is my very first one. Yeah. There was an organization, and what I loved about it was they really did a good job of quantifying it. And at the time, they were getting audits, and it was over sales tax. And every time they would have an audit, their people would put together all this information, and they would give it to the auditor, and without, it was always they got dinged. $800 here, $900 here, whatever. And we're like, well, let's digitize this process and, make it easier, with workflow. And now what used to take them 2 days now took them 20 minutes. And it was very rarely that they got dinged. So they went from using just a couple licenses of our workflow solution to now their entire company, which, by the way, happens to be a $500 million company, uses it in every facet of their business.
That's cool. Yeah.
And, so I always say to clients when it comes to workflow, you start small and you build on it.
Yep.
It's easier to do. But that is probably, that or the one where I talked earlier about the manufacturing process with the cameras, because that also was revolutionary.
Yeah. It sounds like it'd be really fun to see the immediate impact on things.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in IT, you will implement some stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, we got this cybersecurity posture in place, and you don't always see it until something bad happens, or like you get an attempt. But I feel like there'd be a lot of immediate impact in the things that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So final question before we wrap up here. What's your go-to when someone says, our printer's not working? They give you a call and they say that.
That doesn't happen very often. Now, my previous employer and the large company that bought them, that was the first time in my career it happened. And they were getting ghosted by the previous company. They couldn't get a hold of anyone. The service had really declined. That was very unusual because that was a very isolated thing. But it's not very often that technology fails to that point. It's usually the existing company kind of gives them an I don't care response.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so it's kind of building, and then finally the dam bursts, and you've built a relationship, and they're like, I'm just tired of dealing with these folks. But it's not that often that the technology breaks. Maybe we find a better technology, but it's not like I've been able to print for 2 weeks, you know.
Sure.
It's usually something else that's causing.
Something else that's in there.
Yeah.
We always do the little joke. We're like, we do everything but printers. But like we still do, but at this, like not like we'll help fix, but at the same time, they can be so complicated every once in a while. Yes. But it's great when they just work. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's kind of what you're looking for.
It makes everyone's life easier.
Yes, 100%.
My job is to not have my clients think about print.
Yeah. Frictionless.
If I do that, I've done my job.
Great. Well, Scott, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all that James Imaging is doing for local and national companies, and just the difference that you're making and opening up people's eyes, educating, and just having this conversation.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for watching IT Unplugged. Make sure you watch our other episodes, subscribe, like. We cover all things IT, cybersecurity, and business. Thanks so much.